Everyone. So today I'm giving a lecture on disability, sexuality, and dwarfism, which is slightly different from what you've been doing so far with international perspectives. But for some reason, this is when it's timetabled. Okay, so as you probably know, there's been a lot of reports in historical sexual assault claims, including Hollywood, where you have the Me Too movement, and also within charities. Okay, so there's this wide claim of historical sexual assault claims in even young football clubs in the 70s, children's homes from the 70s, all of this, okay? And if you think about it, some dodgy BBC presenters like Jimmy Savile or what is it, Hugh Edwards, all this, okay? So reports of sexual assaults within charities has been the most shocking. And these are meant to be places that offer support, advice, and advocate for better treatment for the people they supposedly represent. But as we know in disability studies, charities are not always what they seem. Charities are supposedly purveyors of goodwill who aim to provide equality and help people. But as his lecture shows, how disabled charities can also be guilty of allowing sexual assault and sexual harassment to take place amongst its members with minimal support to the victim. But that is no different from general victims of sexual assault, because it's that one crime where the victim is often perceived as the perpetrator. This usually has something to do with misogyny. So this lecture shows how as a doctoral researcher and a person with dwarfism, attending conventions to recruit participants, this was associations for people with dwarfism, I was sexually assaulting after refusing to date a man with dwarfism. He just couldn't take no for an answer. So in this lecture, I call for disability research to take more consideration of the safety of the researcher. Because as you will slowly find out, especially with doing your dissertation, disability research is all about identity, rapport, voice. To have an identity as a person with dwarfism was supposedly a great thing, but not so much as a woman with dwarfism. So this lecture is a mixture of disability researcher safety and exploring sexuality in relation to dwarfism. Now, it might be quite triggering for some of you, so I don't expect you to watch it. But do catch up on other lectures as I will continue to check Moodle. You can also feel free to email me with any questions or come in if you need to chat. Okay, so the aims. Basically, people with dwarfism are represented and therefore deemed asexual or hypersexual. So consider some of the representations of dwarfism, maybe Snow White, the Oompa Loompas, or Mini-Me. They are all asexual, unattractive, subhuman oddities. I mean, would you really want to date Mini-Me? Nope, me neither. Although men with dwarfism think that if you're a woman with dwarfism, you somehow are they are entitled to date you. Now, the problem is many people's perceptions of people with dwarfism is constructed by media representations of the condition. However, for example, Peter Dinklage challenges many stereotypes associated with dwarfism. He does not play the fool, and this has led to him being deemed attractive by some women. Not just women with dwarfism, but also average size women, including my friend's mother, who just thought I would tell you. Okay. Now, a few years ago, and I think I told you this last week, so sorry for the deja vu. Well, for those of you who were there, I was working in a call center. It was a quiet evening, and there wasn't many of us working. A woman in the booth near me, and I was earwigging because I was bored, started asking a colleague if it was strange to fancy a dwarf. And I was like, oh God, I hope it's not me. She then told her colleague how she fancied Peter Dinklage. Well, that's a relief. But thought it was weird to fancy a dwarf. And yeah, I will remind you, she was no beauty herself. I felt so uncomfortable overhearing this conversation, and it made me think about my own appearance and how others would look at me in terms of dating. I have dated average-sized men, but obviously I know my dwarfism can get in the way, as well as my personality. Why would it be weird or strange to fancy a dwarf? Think about it. We're just short. Would it be weird or would it be nice or acceptable if she'd said, is it weird that I fancy a wheelchair user? is it weird that I fancy, guy, he's not white, is he? Is it weird that I fancy him? But that's okay. That's not okay. But it's okay when it's related to dwarfism, because dwarfism are weird, aren't they? It'd be weird if you had a fetish for an Oompa Loompa, but to fancy a person with dwarfism, that's not weird, but it is very disableist to think it is. Okay, so let's think of the social model and disability and sexuality. So Tom Shakespeare, he's one of the that does write or has written a lot about sort of disability and sexuality. So you might want to look that up if you're interested. So as he said, the problem of disability and sexuality is not an inevitable outcome of our bodily differences. It is not because we cannot walk or we cannot see or because we lack feeling in this or that part of the body that disabled people have sexual problems. The barriers to sexual expression of disabled people are primarily to do with the society in which we live, not the bodies with which we are endowed with. So it's very this cultural construction of the disabled body, this ableist perception of the disabled body. Because a lot of people are not, I'm speaking about other disabled people here. If they're dating a non-disabled person, then often people think, oh, is he your carer? He must be your carer. Or he's so good with you. He does a lot for you. There's all these social perceptions of dating a disabled person. Can they actually have sex? Well, you're a bit pervy for asking. Okay, so then disability and sexuality. Disabled people are often deemed asexual, i.e., they don't have sex or are not capable of having sex or consenting to sex. Don't get me wrong, some disabled people are probably asexual and accept that. But to presume that all are is problematic. Others are often deemed hypersexual, wanting too much sex and not knowing the signs for no. Okay, some men with dwarfism really don't help themselves here. Think of some of the ways disabled people are culturally represented. They're often pitiful, dependent, childlike, and unattractive. This does not make a person attractive and thus lacking sexuality. Okay, and that's also linked to eugenics because in wider society, we'd rather see disabled as asexual because heaven forbid they should breed. Okay, so I will speak about some of these experiences more in relation to dwarfism in the next lecture, in some of my other lectures. However, I just want to share a few examples because I like to rant. So I'm sorry, maybe just pass this. People often make a fuss when there is a supposed height difference between them and their partner, and I'm speaking of average size people here. Okay, usually they make a big fuss because their partner, usually male, is a whole 12 inches taller than them, and she is such a cutesy pootsy woman, And so that is nothing. However, what this does is makes it harder for people with dwarfism to date average sized people. So one of my exes, and I'm relieved to say an ex, was 2 foot 3 inches taller than me. Okay, that's another foot and 3 inches taller than what these cutesy poo women go on about. This created a lot of unwanted attention, especially if we were holding hands. Okay, so when you make a fuss of it, when it's okay to date a woman who's petite, because men prefer shorter women, don't they, in general? They don't like to be emasculated. So they will date maybe a woman that's quite shorter and she will play on that. Not saying all women, but they'll be like, he's a whole foot taller than me. And then maybe the magazine will get her to stand on her footstool to be like how cutesy poo she is. It's very different for people with dwarfism than just being short. You carry all that cultural baggage. You're usually disproportionate in your body size, deformed. That makes it different. So disabled people are often infantilized. They are treated like children, which can make forming an intimate relationship difficult. Some disabled people spend a lot of time in hospitals where they have a lack of privacy, and this can lead to a lack of sexuality for them or being deemed sexual. So many people with dwarfism, they do date average sized people or other people with dwarfism. However, they encounter numerous difficulties when looking for a date. We're all aware that height is an important factor in dating for a lot of people. However, there are many reasons why people with dwarfism find dating difficult. Sometimes people deem people with dwarfism as undateable due to their height and the cultural baggage they carry. which I'll talk about in the next slide. Or some people with dwarfism worry that people just want to sleep with them as a dare or to fulfill a fetish. For example, a guy that had gone to school with me randomly contacted me on social media, asking if I fancied a dirty weekend with him in Cardiff. I mean, wow, he's such a, I mean, who could resist that? Because he had a thing for little women like me. He had a fetish. Well, you know me well enough by now to know what my response was. But this was it. He didn't mind contacting me to be his fetish. So the other thing is we're culturally represented very problematic. So I want to go onto this book by Morpin, okay? And it's called Maybe the Moon. And it's based on the woman who actually filled the costume of E.T. in the 1980 film E.T., the extraterrestrial. And so it's largely based on her. Well, the good thing is it shows that she dates this average sized person. But when it comes out, because she's kept this diary, and when it comes out, well, she's passed away, and they want to make a film about her, the producer has this problem, because, oh, dwarf's romantic life. So Caddy has dwarfism. So the producer goes, how wed are we to Caddy's dwarf romantic life? The sex scenes made me extremely uncomfortable, and I can assure you I won't be the only woman who will feel that way. The central romantic relationship would be between Renee and Neil, both average-sized characters. I would find it more intriguing if Caddy were acting as a sort of witty mediator, because us dwarfs are witty, between the full-sized lovers. We don't know when we don't want to know who she fucks. We really don't. You see, it makes average-sized people uncomfortable that disabled people, in this case, people with dwarfism, have sex. But what was interesting in Morpin's construction of this story was Renee and Neil. They didn't have this perfect relationship. Neil was a wife beater. But that's okay. It's more acceptable to have a relationship like that than it is to have any love life when you are disabled. And I think other minorities can probably relate to that as well. But it shows the discriminatory attitudes of society. And so I just thought this, this quote from a book really did tie it all together. And it made me understand how people view me as a person with dwarfism. So I want you to look at this video, Disablest Infantilization. Obviously, I'm not going to show you it now, but you can please pause the video and go and watch this and whatever, and think about what you will. Okay? So moving on to the unforbidden relationship. So as Professor Bolt, you might know him, defines the unforbidden relationship as the intimacy between disabled people that, unlike the forbidden relationship, does not cross the normative divide, but nonetheless shocks as it counters notions of asexuality, not to mention the received incompatibility of happiness and disability. So the unforbidden relationship is when two disabled people date. That's unforbidden because the non-disabled people who like to stick their oar into everything don't mind if two non-disabled people are dating. Okay, keep them to themselves. The forbidden relationship is when a disabled person dates a non-disabled person. Okay, that crosses the normative divide because you've got one normal person there, supposedly normal person, but the thought of them dating a disabled person, how sick is that, according to society? So, as you may know, if this can be applied to dwarfs dating other dwarfs. They are seen as the unforbidden relationship. And if you think about Channel 4's The Undateables, even that name, isn't it? So have you noticed in The Undateables how the majority of dates are between two disabled people? Basically, two disabled people who are deemed asexual are acceptable to see dating. It could be like, oh, you could have the Cutesy Poo magazine article of the couple with Down syndrome dating and getting married. Aren't they cute? So this is acceptable, but the forbidden relationship would be a dwarf or any other disabled person dating a non-disabled person. So you might want to think back to your level C work, and I'm sure maybe Laura showed you this. There was an article from one of those dodgy women's magazines about a woman with dwarfism being married to an average-sized man. Why is that even news? Would it be news to sort of say, oh, look, my husband has one arm and we date? Or like I have a suntan and we date, whatever. You know, why are we even bothered about this? Thus, people with non-normative bodies can date each other. That's the unforbidden relationship. But a person with a non-normative body cannot date or is seen as weird to date someone with a normative body. So you can Google this too if you don't believe me. So I'm going to have another little rant, so you might want to move forward. Talk show host Rosie O'Donnell interviewed Z-list celebrity Chelsea Handler. Chelsea Handler is a Z-list comedian and presenter. Chelsea had her very own dwarf who she used to dress up. Chelsea is quite sad. Okay, so this was a middle-aged woman, or no, sorry, yeah, well, a middle-aged woman. And he was a middle-aged man with dwarfism, and he recently passed away. But automatically, Chelsea deems dwarfs as subhuman. He was also almost like her pet, her plaything. Anyway, she stated on Rosie's show how when she sees dwarfs, she likes to tackle them in a playful way. And so I'm thinking of carrying around a knuckle duster. Then Rosie asked her if she would ever sleep with a dwarf. And Chelsea very seriously replied, no, as that would be child abuse. Okay, so basically, because people with dwarfism are the same height as the child, and she was exposed to dwarf entertainers who often act like children, because Chidi, this man who she used to hire out, was just quite embarrassing. She somehow thinks that sleeping with an adult is child abuse. So, wow, if you want to be deemed asexual, there is no better way than to be infantilized. My exes were many things, but none were pedos. So Rosie defended Chelsea by stating that she was scared of dwarfs because she didn't get how an adult could be so small. I mean, I know they put a lot of rubbish on TV, but that was even worse, wasn't it? The problem is people watch this rubbish and agree with it. I mean, we know people, as you know, in America, will believe this kind of rubbish because look who they voted in. But it was really offensive, but it didn't make the news so much. It was seen as acceptable. I mean, if she was sleeping with a child with dwarfism, yeah, it would be child abuse. But I mean, if Chelsea Handler sleeps with anyone, it's abuse, isn't it? Just Google her. So social spaces and sexuality. So it's a bit of a social model thing going on here. So again, Shakespeare points out that most people tend to meet potential partners in social spaces, like pubs, bars, and all that. And this is difficult for disabled people due to both physical and social obstacles or barriers. So you think about how inaccessible bars and nightclubs are for disabled people. And then there's stigmas with impairments that can lead to unwanted attention and impact their self-esteem in those spaces. You know, I've had many a comedian and I like an average sized man thinking he's the first person in the world to ever ask if I'm grumpy, you know, and then he giggles. I'm like, maybe this is a form of like me just being, you know, caring the community, being nice to these men, you know, make them feel better. But that's the thing. And I know a lot of people now, they don't necessarily meet in a pub or whatever. They do, you know, the whole dating apps, Tinder and all this. But again, for disabled people, exposing yourself as, don't expose yourself on a dating site, but it's exposing yourself as a disabled person on a dating site is very problematic, especially dwarfism. You don't want them sharing pictures of you on social media and having a good giggle. So then there's associations for people with dwarfism, which I really hate. So spaces for people with dwarfism are, you know, they're there to meet others and interact within a space in the same way that average-sized people get to interact within society on a daily basis. So as Rob Cruz suggests, it is important to consider the geographies of dwarfism as it aids in understanding their social spatial experiences. An association removes, by having this space where everyone has dwarfism, well, there are average-sized people like Acon Mamas and all that, but, you know, hopefully they're just staying away somewhere. But it's everything that's okay for people with dwarfism. It removes all of the unwanted attention people with dwarfism experience in society. So there's no weirdo asking if you're happy or grumpy, okay? And so this could be coupled with the demographics of the space, which had both pros and cons for my research. So associations for people with dwarfism allow the opportunity for people with dwarfism to come together and socialize. So there's loads and loads of people with dwarfism in one space. So when I was doing my PhD, I knew no dwarfs personally. Okay, I'm the only person with dwarfism in my family. I live in Bangor, North Wales. I am like, well, I was living in Bangor, North Wales, I should say. where there was no other person with dwarfism. 80% of people with dwarfism are born to average-sized parents. It's a rare impairment, unless you don't just randomly bump into people with dwarfism, unless, you have me as a personal tutor. So to recruit participants for interviews, I decided to attend a few events held by 2 associations for people with dwarfism, because I could get a load of people and go, do you want to take part? So this is where intersectionality, these various identities people hold. Anna's gone on about this, hasn't she? It could be your race, your gender, religion, whatever, becomes important. I presented myself as a researcher with dwarfism who was conducting a doctoral research project on the experiences of people with dwarfism. However, how I presented myself differed to how some other members perceived me. Some men with dwarfism failed to see me as a researcher and instead viewed me as a woman with dwarfism who was at a convention where they were looking for a date. Now, I have no problem with them looking for a date. They can do that if they want. But when a person says no, you listen to them, don't you? Unless you're like Andrew Tate or something. So one guy I met, let's just say he had a hard time responding to the word no. Very much like Trump. So associations, there's pros and cons, isn't there? But this is all dependent on your intersectionality. So associations offer the opportunity to meet a lot of people with dwarfism in one place, which was great in terms of recruitment. However, some people with dwarfism use these places to find a date. Again, that's fine. This is all linked to disability and sexuality and how it is situated in different spaces. I found it hard to present myself as a researcher within a space that is also used for dating. So Howland and Ritala found that disabled people often prefer to date other disabled people. Fine, but we got to look at those reasons. They might feel safer not getting bullied. People understand another person with a similar disability to them or condition is going to have a better understanding of their experiences and their needs. A convention full of people with dwarfism offers those who would prefer to date another person with dwarfism the opportunity to date this. And a lot of people with dwarfism have met their partner who also have dwarfism through attending social events held by associations. But I have found through my research that a lot of people I have met had found a partner at convention. And so Weinberg, now this is quite an old reference, but I'll update it with a new one, states that 43% of participants in his study had found their partner through an association. This is participants with dwarfism. Furthermore, Adelson points out that dating can be difficult for people with dwarfism. Many people with dwarfism find relationships through attending conventions or associations. But it is often assumed by age people, like average-sized people, that dwarfs marry each other. This also seemed to be assumed by some men with dwarfism, who seem to think that, you're a dwarf, I'm a dwarf, let's date. And he's like, no, you're boring. So Adelson also notes that at LPA conventions, those who have married an average-sized person have been accused of marrying out and not being able to accept their dwarfism. I mean, what happened to marrying because you've fallen in love with someone? I mean, if an average-sized person goes, I want to date you just because you're a dwarf, that's a fetish. Okay, and it's weird, and you stay well away from them. Whereas if a man with dwarfism says, I want to date you because you're a dwarf, yeah, we can see that what Howland and Rittler say, that it could be because their needs, similarities, their understanding, that's fine. But it's also very presumptuous and weird. So what is problematic is that some do not take no for an answer, but as most women, they know this to be true. When an average-sized person wants to date a person with dwarfism, like I say, it's deemed a fetish. When a dwarf wants to date another person, that's seen as sweet and cute. Personally, I see it as creepy. Okay, so associations and dating. The social situation within associations changes, which makes dating easier. As a woman with dwarfism, how my sexuality is often perceived in public clearly differed from how it was perceived at the convention. So Shakespeare argues that sexuality is socially constructed. If disability is deemed as asexual within society, then spaces such as conventions held by associations for people with dwarfism, the social construction of sexuality will differ within those spaces. Shakespeare also points out that most people tend to meet potential partners in social spaces, and it's difficult for disabled people, as I've said, because of the social and physical barriers. For people with dwarfism, meeting a potential partners within typical social spaces for dating, such as nightclub or bar, can prove difficult due to unwanted social encounters they often experience. So as I've explored before, people with dwarfism often receive unwanted attention, especially in spaces such as bars, where people tend to be inebriated and more likely to harass people with dwarfism. That's when, the average sized man gets brave. Further to this, Shakespeare suggests that meeting a potential partner is affected by a person's self-esteem. It is understandable that someone's self-esteem is going to be affected by the unwanted attention they receive from others. But attending a convention provides some people with dwarfism more confidence in finding a partner and dating. So as Irving Goffman points out, and whose work is, highly regarded in terms of the work he does on stigma, suggests that those who are stigmatized will come together through the creation of their own groups. Being occupied by mostly people with dwarfism changes the social relations within the space, as well as influencing how people with dwarfism socially interact within it. People with dwarfism can socialize in conventions in ways that they cannot, or at least find difficult, elsewhere. So according to Goffman, those who share the same stigma will feel more at ease with each other, as they know what it is like to live with a stigma, and they're more sympathetic towards each other. And also, they're not as stupid as someone as Chelsea Handler, who thinks dwarfs are children. So conventions for people with dwarfism are considered safe spaces in terms of removing many of the social barriers they experience within society. What is good about these spaces is that all of the negative attention we receive in society disappears. Nobody has to fear being stared at, called a midget, or ending up as a comedy prop for someone to try and impress their mates. I didn't have to watch my back in case someone wanted a photo of the dwarf to put on Facebook. This, of course, makes people feel at ease and increases their self-esteem. This, in turn, along with meeting other people with dwarfism, provided more people with the opportunity to look for a date. The downside to this is, as a result, they can also be spaces that influence certain sexual behaviors, unwanted sexual behaviors. I was asked out by a man who I had advertised the project to. Now, as I say, I advertised the project to him, not myself. So I refused to be his date and thought that would be the end of the matter. However, he made a few comments throughout the day which made me feel uncomfortable, such as saying he would come up to my room to watch me try on a dress. I mean, sorry for that mental image. Okay. There was also an auction because, raising money for the charity, where I found him bidding on a necklace. I outbid him, and then somebody outbid me, thankfully, because I was a student at the time and I was skint. But the only reason I was bidding on it was to keep it, because I knew what his motive was. He then asked why I was bidding on a necklace he was trying to win for me. I told him I was not his date and could buy my own jewelry. I couldn't buy my own jewelry. I was a skint student. Then we were all placed together for this evening meal, in these round tables kind of thing. Like, you've been to a wedding or something, you know what I mean? It was then when I went to get coffee where he followed me and grabbed my hand and sexually assaulted me. It might not seem like much of what he did, but he had no right to behave in that way, as I had made it clear to him that I was not interested in being his date. He was a creep, but I didn't tell him that at the time. However, he felt he could treat me in a way he wanted to. For the rest of the night, I stayed away from him and left early the next morning. I felt unsafe. Even one of my hotel key cards had gone missing. Now, here, I want you to, again, pause this and go and look at this video. It's by talk show host Saleh Jessa Raphael, okay? And I want you to watch this video and consider how people with dwarfism are constructed and how this relates to the unforbidden relationship. It gave me the creeps, not because of the whole dwarfism thing, but I was just like, love, you're embarrassing yourself. It reinforces the thing, I want to date another little person. Why? Why would you? Okay. So I've got other women who came forward. Now I'm also writing a paper at the moment about other women who've been sexually assaulted. So I've got quite a lot of survey data. So here are some quotes. You can read them yourself. And so, yeah, so these are just two other women who shared their experiences with me. Of course, not all men with dwarfism behave like this, but there are some who do. And it's not knowing which are part of that some who do that is the problem. Conventions provide them with a particular space in which to act inappropriate within, because it boosts their self-esteem, doesn't it? And I've seen videos where dwarves hire themselves out, dressed as an Oompa Loompa or something. And they're at a stag do, and then they meet a hen do, and they start, the woman who's drunk off, is dancing, and the dwarf is smacking her bum. But it's all playful, isn't it? Because the dwarf isn't real human being. He's a child, so it's okay if the man over 18 smacks your bum because he's a dwarf. If there's another man, an average size man, that probably wouldn't be so good. So at conventions, if they're taken place over a weekend, it is likely that most people will stay at a nearby hotel, or the actual convention will be at a hotel. This provides some men with dwarfism the opportunity to make advances that they only have the opportunity to do within this space. And it's within a short time period, isn't it? A couple of days. For the rest of the year, they go back to doing whatever they do. So after the convention, they may not see another one with dwarfism until next year. So you got to act quick. So, as we know, reporting it for even non-disabled people, it's often quite bad. I did not report the incident straight away, and this is not uncommon for various reasons. Okay, it's a myth that people who are victims of sexual assault, just as soon as the thing happens, that they go off and report it, because a lot take time to process what's happened to them. Okay, so I played the incident over and over in my head and felt that I was overreacting. Okay, again, that comes with fear of disbelief, shame, guilt, embarrassment, not wanting friends, family to know, concerns about confidentiality, although not really confidentiality here, am I? So I played it over my head. I was worried about the implications it could have on my PhD. So as some researchers point out, it's difficult for doctoral researchers to find a good balance between carrying out research that is ethical and ensuring academic success. I eventually told my supervisors because there was another convention coming up, and the closer it got, the more anxious I felt about attending. I was scared. I couldn't, I'd go there as a professional. I'm like trying to recruit participants. If I turn around and belt someone for, inappropriate behaving, nobody's going to want to take part in my interviews. So I explained what had happened to my supervisors, and they provided me with advice on what to do. One being report it. So I emailed the association and cancelled my place at the next convention. After reporting the incident, I was provided with minimal support from the association. And most communication I got was the threat of legal action for documenting the incident in my doctoral thesis. The association had failed to follow any procedures or protocols, and later it was discovered that the person on the committee is now in a relationship with the perpetrator. So I'm reporting this now because I'm a bit gobby. Because like many other people, I don't feel as threatened by the association due to safety in numbers. Before, especially after the communication I had from the association, I felt disbelieved and embarrassed. Again, that shame, the guilt. I had one man who was part of the association telling me that exposing what had happened would scare men with dwarfism away. All I could say to that is good. It was as if I should feel scared that I'd miss the opportunity to date a man with dwarfism. What do they think they are, Brad Pitt or something? Again, it showed the mindset of some men with dwarfism, presuming that I wanted to date them because of our shared impairment. Actually felt reporting it, if it scared those kind of men away, that was only a good thing. So, female researchers and sexual assault. This is not just for people with dwarfism, and I want you to just keep this in mind. The difficulty of recruitment in relation to men with dwarfism was not helped by the fact that there is limited consideration of research safety, and that sexual assault has not been given much attention within research ethics. So when you're carrying out research, it's all about protecting the participants. And this all has to do with the history of ethics, because it's all about protecting participants, because ethics started about, when it came out about the Nazis doing horrible experiments on people. So this is also difficult when taking into consideration the requirements of disability research, which favors breakdown of power and more involvement from the participants, having that rapport with them. Think about it. Disability studies was mostly constructed by disabled men. I'm not saying that men cannot be victims of sexual abuse. Of course they can. The majority of victims are women. Thus, the safety of the researcher has been given limited attention, and this is partly down to who created the subject. I'm not blaming disabled activists for what happened, but considering why it has been overlooked. In all research, and you'll know this when it comes to completing your ethics form, the researcher's safety is given limited attention. So, some recommendations. So, when I got quite a lot of interviews, but I had 2 interviews with men, one part of a paired interview, because they were a married couple, and one was just from this guy that I thought, okay, no, I'll give another one a chance. But he thought the interview was a date. And I'm like, we didn't have like candlelight or anything, it wasn't a date. If it was, it's the most boring one I've been on because I was recording you talking about dwarfism, but each their own. So there are some recommendations. These are suggestions for improving researcher safety. However, they can impact upon the type of data gathered. For example, some participants may not want to share certain information in front of their partner, or some may feel intimidated by the presence of 2 researchers. 2 researchers being present impacts upon the power relations in an interview. I now avoid using conventions to recruit participants. Whilst this makes me feel safer, it does mean that I have to rely on other forms of recruitment which aren't always reliable, including social media. So to conclude, bet you're relieved I said that. There are numerous factors which impact upon people with dwarfism forming intimate relationships, as well as disabled people in general. The nature of their impairments, their body aesthetics, and the cultural baggage they carry constructs them as subhuman and childlike, and thus unattractive. Through considering the importance of intersectionality, I have highlighted some of the ethical complexities experienced when carrying out disability research. My identity, both as a woman and as someone with dwarfism, affected how I was viewed and treated by others. Associations need to respond to the probability of sexual harassment and assault that could take place within their conventions. Dating should not be discouraged, but more guidance is needed in regards to appropriate behavior. No means no. Associations need to ensure that proper protocols are followed if anybody ever reports sexual assault to them. Instead of just saying, oh yeah, he's a handful. Oh no, that doesn't happen here. Oh, he was drunk. Oh, he was drunk. Okay, that's fine. Okay. In relation to research, more consideration needs to be given to the multiple identities of the researcher and how it can impact upon their participants and how they view them. More consideration needs to be given to the research in terms of safety in relation to sexual harassment and assault. Okay, and there's some further references. I would, like, if you're interested in disability and sexuality, Shakespeare's Disabled Sexuality Towards Rights and Recognitions is a key reading. Okay, thank you.